Well, Jay, welcome. Go ahead and tell me where you're from, a little bit about yourself, what you're going to be sharing with me today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I live in the UK at the moment. I've been living here for a long, long, long time now, but I'm also quite traveled. So, grew up in Europe, spent time in Australia. As a matter of fact, I spent that time on the US as well, both California, Texas. But now being here in the UK, sort of south down, not too far from the coast outside London for quite a long time. And in terms of what I'd like to share, um, well, I'll happily, gladly share anything you ask me about, because I think it's a fantastic initiative we're having here. Happy to go as deep into my life, my kinks, my fetishes, my story, um, as you wish, really.
So let's start with, if you don't mind sharing how old you are and how long you've been into BDSM when you got started with that. How old were you?
Yeah, absolutely. So just at 50, actually. So maybe not the youngest kid anymore, been around the block a little bit. And then I get into BDSM. So I got interested and knew I had fetishes and kinks essentially straight out of puberty. I think I was uh not sure 17 or something like that when I sort of first noticed, oh, there is something that really interests me, that really fascinates me. Obviously didn't join the scene at that age and didn't move for many, many years. Yeah, but I was very 17 when I became very interested in and we have to grasp some understanding with domination, dominatrixes, also with the fluff fetishes, the leather, latex. So they've been like that all my life long. I really struggled a little bit at that age, sort of defining it. What essentially happened, if it let me just join the story here. Essentially, I knew nothing about any of this, right? And there was an article in a sort of very vanilla mainstream magazine, right? So something like People magazine or Newsweek or something, the Philistines will probably know. That was just a sort of an article about the dominatrixes. I think in Amsterdam, I'm not sure, some big European city, doesn't really matter. And as I've talked about their life and what they did, and it obviously had some pictures. So it was just sort of mainstream vanilla journalism, maybe a little bit sensationalist, but again, it was a vanilla, normal People magazine kind of thing. And I was really sort of hooked on that, and I read it, and I reread it, and I reread it, and I looked at the pictures, and the pictures were obviously all in this sort of leather and latex dress. I quite liked that. But I think, and it took me a long time to figure that out, I liked it a little bit more. I think it was this idea of a strong, dominant woman, and the picture was just sort of the impersonation. So, um, yeah, sort of that sort of really stuck with me, and what I essentially did. And the important thing is, I think the younger listeners would have find this very funny. This was pre-internet. I was 17. I effectively smuggled myself into an adult store, very much illegal. But again, 30 years ago, nobody cares anymore. Wasn't even like any of the nice, cool, thinky fetish thing like you have in London and Amsterdam and Berlin. It was really one of these horrible, grumpy old men, whatever things. But you end up buying like a bunch of magazines there, and in these times, these magazines were sort of it's for free purposes. They had sort of a section that was sort of, photo stories and photos a little bit porny, essentially. But then they had like educational articles as well back then, because we didn't have no internet, right? And then they have like little sort of advertisements in the back, like people seeking other people, but also quote on seeking people. So in the beginning, that's really all I had sort of reading some of the stuff, right? And I'm not gonna lie, I obviously did enjoy the picture setting, the side of it, but really the educational articles and the sort of stuff people did and didn't do once, so it was really interesting. And yeah, then to be honest, I just lived with that. I wouldn't say I became lonely overall in life, but one thing that maybe didn't work too well for me is I really then sort of at that age struggled a little bit finding girlfriends, etc., etc. Partially because of that fetish and feeling a bit, insecure and ashamed about it. But then at uni and later on, like very early 20s, I think I've been incredibly lucky, essentially thinking about other people. I got together with another student, a girl, and she was actually fairly kinky too, or at least willing to experiment. So I had a bit of sort of real world experience quite early on. But I mean, it was the tame bedroom stuff, right? It was the sort of, oh, the stress on handcuffs and that start blindfolds.
How old were you at this point? You said in excuse me, in university, so you were probably what, like 18, 19 or so, or how old were you? And it was this year, so that's kind of like your first in person.
It was a tiny bit older. It was like a year before university. Also for some master's degree, took a little bit longer. So it was like 2021, I think, early 21. Yeah, yeah. So, and that was, I think, really, really good. And in hindsight, I think I'm lucky. Lots of people don't have these experiences, or maybe times have changed, maybe they do nowadays. And again, it was a bit vanilla-ish, but anyway, it was an experience, some play, very switchy as well at the time. So it wasn't necessarily the sort of soul deep submissive at that point. But then, as stuff goes, relationships fall apart. My degree eventually came to London, and I think at that point, then mid-20s, it was really, really clear to me. I'm very, very much on the submissive side, and I sort of started to engage with the scene here. Super scared, super worried in the beginning. Took me a little bit, but I went to some lunches. Also started looking for play partners, ITV life partners, or like normal permanent relationships. But also started the sessioning every so often with our programs effectively there. So that's how this sort of developed early on.
Okay. You said initially when you started getting into BDSM, you were kind of experimenting with switching, being dominant and being submissive, because you were probably just trying to figure things out at that point. And can you tell me a little bit more about what you guys were doing?
Sort of started, this was often does in relationships with fairly vanilla the sex, obviously a little bit of flavor, different positions, not always in the bedroom. And then we sort of got a bit into blindfolds, which I think nowadays is probably also fairly vanilla. Then we have like this sort of, again, play, handcuffs, and then I essentially started saying to my girlfriend back then, actually, I kind of enjoy that stuff. And we went a little bit off further, sort of a bit of flopping under bed restraints, but it was all very much, foreplay style, as in, yeah, we did that, but then nearly always ended up in with a traditional, I'm allowed to say, penetration, vanilla sex. This is how far it went. So this wasn't a sort of 24/7 lifestyle thing. It wasn't overly painful or overly sort of lasting psychological. It was something we did largely in the bedroom. So I think it gave me some practical experience with practical things, flogging, etc. It was not maybe quite there where I wanted to be or needed to be psychologically.
Okay. And then did you say that it kind of progressed into when you went to go see professional doms? Is that what you said?
Yes. So two things happened. So I moved to London then. two things happened. I got into the local scene eventually with, lots of nervousness, as this is the case. Like going to your first munch is very daunting. But I also started seeing professionals every so often as well, and then things certainly progressed. I think what happened is that the scene munches helped me to feel a lot better about all this. It was not that all these people were all into these things, and they give you tips and they point you to events, but also they're normal people, right? Then we'll also talk about the weather and football or the car they purchased live. That was normal people who have these kinks. I think that helped in that angle. Also met some dominant women, submissive women as well. And then on the pro-dom angle, I think that helped me to start experimenting with things that were maybe basically more demanding, but also explore different fetishes, right? So it wasn't then just the fluffy hand props and the soft rockers. There was, not initially, but over time, play that was basically harder, but there was also play that was sort of psychologically very different, more controlling elements of manipulation and feminization, sort of elements of quite strong bondage and surrender, and genuinely serving, even having to run stores.
Tell me,
So since then
tell me a little bit about what that first munch was like that you went to. Like when you walked in the door, what did you see?
So first of all, I walked past the door about 3 times, and I think this is almost a trope. I think everybody does that. And then eventually I made my way in, and I'm not sure what I expected. After like the first 2 seconds, I wasn't even sure what the munch was. The top was full. Everybody looked normal, right? It's not like there's people in the matrix standing in the corner, but then obviously they had their munch mascot. I'm not sure if that's a thing in the States. In the UK, most munches have like a little fluffy toy on the table or something of that, and then I sort of worked it out. And I'd intentionally gone to a little larger munch, because it sort of gives you the opportunity to sort of, you have a drink, you stand in the corner, you watch a little bit, and that's what I very much did. But then I, sort of started talking to people, hey, are you here for the munch? Is it your first time? And you sort of get into it. And then by the end of the evening, I would say 80% of the conversations had actually been vanilla and about football, maybe 20% about kink. But then I sort of realized, these are just normal people. These are lovely socials. The drink with people who seem super nice, maybe could indeed become friends. And then I sort of went to more events, essentially.
Okay. And then so what kind of activities, as you were kind of experimenting with things, made you realize that you were more into being a submissive than a dominant?
So I think deep down, I really always knew I was more of a submissive, but one thing there, and I think we could almost call this the kink. I really like to very genuinely please and serve. So in the few occasions when I acted as a dom, and this is in hindsight, now I know that, when I acted as a dom, I was very much what in the UK they call a pleasure dom, as in you do certain things but you really only do what your partner, the woman that's dynamic, that she really likes and wants. So even though I was maybe at the giving end of a flogger, ultimately I did it because she wanted it, and I was pressuring her, and I was giving her a good time in terms of being like a, very dumb. That's not really in my character. So I think it can be taught. I think this is the better word. I think it can be a half decent, competent top I know how to swing a flogger a bit or try someone up. But the ultimate goal is then really to still psychologically serve the bottom, give her a good time, and I really do that anyway. I'm very much on this submissive.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, and then let's talk a little bit about BDSM in your like relationships. Is that something that you have done since you've been involved in the scene? Is it kind of something that is on the side? Because some people I've talked to, they don't do any kinks with their, more long-term partner. So what's that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I had more than one relationship and more than one long-term relationship as well over the years. I would say it is a mix. There were relationships, and again, in hindsight, these were the ones who didn't last too long, but there was no kink in the relationship,
Gotcha.
and that never really worked out. There were relationships where there was some kink, sort of bedroom style, if you want to call it that, like every so often in the evening on the weekend. And I think the sort of deepest kinky relationship, which was almost going towards a 24/7 sub, almost slash slavery setup, lasted about 1.5 years. Again, very happy, very grateful to have had that. Very sad it was also over. But there I was effectively with a dominant partner, lifestyle dom, and the relationship was very much around the dom sub relationship. It was very clear. She set the tone, she took the decisions. I served her almost like an FLR, really. Maybe not all aspects of it, but I did the housework, traditional vanilla sex was largely, with maybe a small number of exceptions, off the table. It was mostly me serving her orally, essentially. There was still relationship aspects where, yeah, we went to restaurants and had dinner, or we went to the movies, or we had a holiday together. These things were there, but the dom sub tone and approach relationship was there pretty much 24/7. And yeah, very happy to have had that in my life. Many people really don't.
What was the last part?
Many people really don't have that in their life.
Yes. Yeah, that can be quite intense from what I hear. I haven't had that type of relationship, but I talked to another gentleman last week who had two very long relationships with women like that, and it sounded very intense. So, why did the relationship end, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it's one of these life gets into the way. So the person, I mean, her scene name, not her real name. Her scene name was Angelique. I think I can say that. She was originally from in France, and she had to go back for personal family reasons. Wanted to leave the UK anyway, and I couldn't really do that at that time. I'm for professional reasons. And even though we sort of talked a bit about remote and visiting, very hard to do in a relationship like that, and we had to end it essentially.
Yeah, that makes sense. And have you ever been married?
I have been married. I'm also divorced now. Um, so in the marriage, we did a little bit of, again, kinky play, bedroom stuff. I mean, honestly, I think this is so normalized these days. Who doesn't do it? But never really went into exploring like a full DS dynamic.
Okay. And what about now? What is your status as far as what BDSM play you're doing? Are you still meetups? What does that look
Yeah.
like?
So I have had in the last few years still have some essentially play partners. Um, Again, and it's often the case you find a play partner and you're with them for whatever, a year, 1.5 years, and then they move on, life moves on, or it maybe gets a little less exciting. So every so often, I do play, but outside that, very sadly, I am very much single as far as like permanent monogamous relationships are concerned.
Fair enough. So, do you think that there's anything from like your childhood or even we talked about in your adolescence when you first got interested in BDSM that would have kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Not conditioned you, but made you want to get into that? Can you think of anything from like your childhood or adolescence specifically that like might have
Yeah, not really. I now people often wonder about that, and I know many people in the kink scene with terrible childhoods, single parents and abusive parents and foster care, and many of these people, honestly, I think they probably need some help, and maybe kink is sort of an unhealthy outlet for them.
right.
But if I'm honest, I had a very, well, not boring, but a very average middle class upbringing. My mom had like a working class type job. My dad was an engineer. We weren't rich, but we also lacked nothing. Um, I have got two sisters, but I good relationship with them as well. Um,
And
I
how was your
mean,
relationship with your
if
parents?
um, so when my dad has passed away, my mom relationship was always very good. I mean, of course, I can say now because of the two sisters, my dad passing early, my mom, it was a household full of women. But
Mhm.
it's not like that they were somehow abusive to me or anything like that. So maybe there is something at a very deep psychological level, but it's not that I had a horrible bad upbringing or stories of abuse, not at all.
Right. But what's the personality of your mom and your sisters? Would you consider them dominant? Were they kind of bossing you around when you were little or anything like that, or not really?
Maybe my mom a little bit. My sisters, I'm also the oldest one, by the way. No chance. If anything, I bossed them around.
Okay, fair enough. Um, so do you have any advice for people who are interested in getting into BDSM and they're brand new, if they're leaning towards being submissive?
Yes, depends a bit where they are in their journey, but the first thing I would say is, and this is literally for people who just discovering this, or who maybe then potentially also quite young still, um, don't be ashamed, don't be scared, don't paint yourself as a weird or pervert or mentally ill. It's pretty normal. Many, many people are submissive. And if anything, explore it and embrace it. I think that's the first bit of advice. It's okay. Yeah. And then maybe building on that, the next bit of advice is when you explore it, seek, don't fall into a sort of hole of just watching them and becoming a bit of a Buddha. I think this is more men than women, maybe some women, I don't know. Don't do that. Inform yourself. Sort of on other, let's say this, in a fact-based way, look at blogs, look at educational videos. If you're at the right age, you're brave enough, reach out to the scene, go to your first munch. I personally think it is also completely okay to reach out to pro-doms in person, online, but be a little cautious around trying to find a genuine person. There's a sort of scamming about, especially online.
Yes, I agree with that. And then do you have any advice for DOMs, new DOMs or DOMs in general? What would you say to them?
Show a bit of your real personality and your real self. And I don't mean dox yourself, talk about intimate stuff, but do a bit of real talk content. Present yourself as a real person with your real character and style. And this is what I also love about your channel, Goddess. The real content you come across as very, very real and genuine, and subs will pick up on that energy. Yeah. So that would be my sort of first bit of advice, because there are lots of, especially very young DOMs online, where every bit of content is you having paypig, loser, sissy, pay me, die, love that. It's all copy and paste content, and they're all the same.
You're not the first person to say that. I've heard that from other submissives as well, as they like it when DOMs share. Like you said, you don't have to tell everything about yourself, and you can still stay private, but to show a little bit more of your personality versus just the fantasy part. And I agree, especially when you are young. I'm a little bit older, so I think with a lot of people, confidence comes with age a little bit to some extent. And sometimes when you're young and you're a little bit insecure, then you don't really know yourself, So
yeah, no, exactly. And I also think if you're really insecure and you really don't have the gun in you, don't do it. You're not gonna be happy. Subs will spot it. And honestly, if you still want to be a little sex worker, there's so many other avenues to foot content, to ASMR content, to whatever you're comfortable with. But submissives can sniff out inauthentic DOMs very easily.
Yeah, very true. Exactly. Anything else that you would like to add? Well, actually, before I ask you that, what would be something you'd like to say, or some advice for people that aren't into BDSM or kinks, as far as being more accepting, or have there been times where people weren't accepting of you?
So I haven't come out universally, right? This is where we do the faff of the voice changer. The only people I have come out to are people in the scene, and so I never had major issues. I have one story of a former girlfriend long time ago. I sort of, you never say full on your kinky X, Y, Z. I sort of started to, spice it up a little bit of do whatever you tell me or blindfold me. And she had a very allergic, like, ooh, I hate this and blah, blah, and what's wrong with you reaction. I did have that. But yeah, I'll just say that relationship did not last long.
That's not normal. So
Yeah.
so she kind of made you feel a little embarrassed about it. Sounds like just didn't have a good.
Yeah, yeah, there.
Um,
Yeah,
anything,
not.
anything else that you would like to add?
Um, that specifically, I mean, thank you for doing these interviews. I think it's important that these stories get out and people hear them. And maybe one last thing in terms of advice for subs is you're not a lesser man cause of it. Because sadly, a lot of these sort of baby dumb confidence, oh, you loser, loser, loser. And it's okay if feel like humiliation as a fetish, but you're not actually lesser man. I would argue in many ways, you are the bigger man, owning up to these feelings and fetishes and submitting to a woman. Maybe I'd say that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It takes a lot more strength to be yourself than to try to be somebody else. A lot of times, and you mentioned earlier about I just think it's really important to, if you do have kinks and that type of thing, to pursue them in a healthy way, versus trying to suppress things that you might want to do because it doesn't, your friends might think less of you or whatnot. I definitely think that it's more harmful to suppress urges and desires and try to fit into a norm than to try to explore them in a healthy way.
Yeah, I would very much see it like that as well. Yes.
Yes. Well, I thank you for your time. It was really nice chatting with you. And I'm sure I will hear from you in my comments or somewhere else.
Yes, no, thank you for doing the interview. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Have a wonderful afternoon, okay?
Yes, yeah, you too. Take care. Bye, bye.